All right, guys. Welcome back to the show. So today we've got Christopher Beary on. He is a real estate investor located out of here of Arlington, Texas,
Mhm.
and of course, he's been in the game for some time. Wanted to, sit down, go through some things with him. He also has his license as well, so he leverages that. I think it's a lot of value for anybody that listens to, or is watching, to kind of hear someone's story about how they kind of did just both sides of the fence because it's not uncommon. It's not super common, at least in the industry
Right.
of realtors and things like that. They're once they're a realtor, they're a realtor. So,
Mhm.
but he plays both sides. So, man, I want to just kind of start there. So, tell us about you and kind of how you got started into real estate investing and just
Y
real estate in general.
Yeah, so real estate investing was always, kinda second. So, really, real estate for me overall was a fallback. Like, I was at
Mhm.
UTA, I started at UTA on my first day of classes, I got the phone call that my son Nicholas was being born.
Oh, wow.
Right.
And so, like, I started that journey with one kid, uh,
Mm.
and me and my wife, uh, met shortly thereafter with about a year after, and she had 2 of her own, and we now have 4 together. So by the time I was 22, I was a father of 4,
Mhm.
um, and my dad pretty much shortly after, me and my wife started dating, and we both told him like, "Hey, we have a little bit of an interest in pursuing a real estate career." Her and I were both in the service industry. I was a bartender at that point for going on like 6 years, most of it illicitly through like connections I had through my cousins who were bartenders in Dallas and things like that. And she was a server. We both kind of like teased at him. He'd have been in real estate since 2002
Mhm.
at Keller Williams. He was a realtor. We just kind of teased the idea like, hey, we might be interested in pursuing that as a career path. For me, it was a fallback. Like I wanted to go to medical school, but I had a doctor, I had a surgeon who I was shadowing, who was a good friend of mine, and I was talking to him one day, and I was telling him what we were doing. He was like, "You have how many kids?" Like, yeah, no, my between my then girlfriend and I, we have 3, and then we're expecting a 4th. And, he pulled me aside and he's like, "Man, if you like those kids, if you like that girl, like, you're not gonna be a doctor. You're not gonna go to medical
For sure.
school." He, like, walked me around the hospital. He's like, "2nd marriage, 3rd marriage, doesn't know his kids, doesn't like his kids, kids don't like him." I was like, "Okay, all right, fair enough." Went home and talked to my dad about that, and, he was like that was the whole reason he got into real estate. He left a 27-year-long career, with Sky Chefs working in the airline industry.
Hmm.
Um Mostly because of 9/11, but also because if he was gonna pursue anything else, he wanted to pursue something that allowed him to spend time with me and my brother.
Yeah.
And kinda from that point forward, I was in 2nd grade, so, you know, he never missed a swim meet, baseball game, practices, all that kinda stuff. And so I'm very grateful that he chose that career path, and, it ultimately came down to made the decision to go into real estate halfway as a fallback, but also because it seemed to be the best option for where I was and the life that I was growing from seed at that point.
Yeah.
Um, got our real estate license, and my wife worked with me all the way up until COVID. We were at Keller Williams together. We had a team under my dad. He's always been our team leader. Um, and really started getting into investing there through wholesaling. It would just be like kind of onesie twosie deals. They were very, very difficult to find. There was a couple of agents who bought deals and flipped them. Tony Salinas, I don't he's still with Keller Williams, I think. Um, I approached him real early on after a deal that we brought to him that he ended up buying on a JV partnership, and that was our first investment property.
Yeah.
That was a lead I generated. He bought it, partnered with me and my dad. I ran the project. Um, and I say that term loosely, like he set everything up, and I went in and checked on the guys and checked the milestones. So that was like
Did
very gracious of
did you
them.
kind of stumble on like after you're kind of working listings and stuff, you kind of realize was it like you're like, you know what, you may not be able to list, but there's something else I can do, or there's another way. Is that kind of how
Yeah.
it kind of came about?
Yeah, and there was a lot of them at that point that was, like, abandoning because I just didn't know and that's kind of that is the realtor world is, like, there's a lot of deals that just that aren't fit for the MLS,
Right.
but you still have a seller who needs to sell, and realtors typically pass on those. They
Yeah.
just pass or more often than not, the seller passes on the realtor. They know, like, I'm realtor's not who I need here. I need somebody who's just gonna buy this from me.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's essentially what happened. We had the house listed across the fence for sale. Guy that owned the house called us up and said, "Hey, I just need to sell this thing. Just
Mm.
come take it off my hands. Do you have anybody who would buy it?" Tony bought it. We partnered on it, made some money, and I ended up asking him, "Hey, can I buy you coffee in like 15 minutes just to kind of talk your ear off a little bit?" He gave me like 3.5 hours.
Mm.
He gave me 3.5 hours. This guy was already like net worth well over $1 million, flipping somewhere between like 150 to 250 homes. He used to have like a We Buy Ugly Houses franchise.
Yeah.
Um, and he just gave me 3.5 hours of basically like, just get really good at what you're doing. I was at the time, I was like 23. He's like, you're really young. Just get really good at what you're doing. Don't worry about flipping houses or anything too sexy. Just get really good at sales. Go close 4 or 5 deals a month. And when you're closing 4 or 5 deals a month consistently and you have an income and you can support your family and keep your lights on, which at the time I couldn't and I wasn't,
Yeah.
then worry about investing. And then but what it really taught me was like, there are these deals out there that I'm passing on. There's something I can do with them, if only at the time, if I can make a couple thousand. I think my average assignment fee at the beginning was like $2,000 to $5,000.
Yeah.
And from there, I found another mentor in Mark Hewitt, and it would just be one of those things where he's like, yeah, bring them to me, and he would help me sell them. A lot of times we would just sell them to New Western. And I think like first deal I ever did, I like made $5,000 with him and ended up bringing him like 5 the next month. Just because they were all over the place.
You just sold it like, hey, New Western, I got something for you. Instead of the other, because they're always the other way around. You're like, no.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got something for you, New Western.
I have one guy at New Western who I dispo through regularly. That guy's great. There's not a ton of them, but like he's great. But yeah, no, essentially investing came about originally as wholesaling, just as a refinement of the sales skills I was developing as a real estate agent. I was just getting really good at talking to sellers, because that was the KW model, was like, buyers are great, but the way you get buyers is by having as much inventory on your shelf as possible. Talk to as many sellers and listings control leads. And just as I was getting really good at discussing sellers' needs and helping sellers set their goals, I was running into more and more motivated sellers who had distressed situations, pre-foreclosures, probates, deaths, ugly title for one reason or another, and helping find them solutions that like really the market wouldn't tolerate, especially at the time, because this was like 2016 and 17, so the market was still really hot. But the houses that got multiple offers were still pretty. Like they were done up, they were staged well, nice professional photography, and those houses got 5-10 offers. But these were properties that needed more work, and working on just coming to a place where everybody was really happy. One of the things that I brought to the table that I really liked at the beginning, because my dad was always been into professional standards and ethics, he served in those committees at like local, state, and national levels, was just being able to approach sellers like, hey, you're getting the We Buy Ugly Houses like postcards, you're getting phone calls and text messages and all that kind of stuff. At the very least, I'm going to shoot you straight, and we're going to go through the numbers together. I'm going to show you how much money you're leaving on the table. I'm going to give you a couple of different options that you can choose from. And at the very least, then you can make an educated decision. And you'd be surprised, people even knowing full well how much money they're leaving on the table are just like, you're making it easy and you're being honest with me. Just please take this from me.
Yeah.
Get it off my hands.
Just done. Let me ask this to kind of back up on like the beginning a little bit. Did you watch your dad? Like, did you go, was he kind of like toting you around to different houses and stuff?
As a kid? Yeah, absolutely.
And,
I have really fond memories of getting in the car with him after 2008 and driving around his listings to make sure that they still had their HVAC systems on the outside.
We know where he's working at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like sometimes I think that he wanted the company, but really I think he just wanted a witness or somebody to call 911 and say in case something bad happened.
Stay in the car.
Yeah.
Don't get out the truck.
Yeah.
So you, I mean, did that? Let me ask you this, because obviously you grew up around it.
Yeah.
And not everybody does. Usually, a lot of people find real estate later on in life.
Right.
Whether it's they want the freedom or whatnot. But what was it like growing up in it and just kind of watching your dad? Like, did you, I know you said you wanted to go and be a surgeon, but did you ever, in the back of your mind, or were you kind of groomed a little bit to, hey, eventually you're going to get to here? Or what was it like growing up in that?
It was never really like an option that my parents considered for me. It was just kind of there in the background, and we'd seen teams. My dad had always kind of entertained like, hey, if you bring me a lead, he used to really, especially once I got my car, he would kind of like stick the carrot out a little bit, and he'd say, hey, if you find something for me and I do something with it, I'll give you $200. Which at the time I was like,
yeah,
$200, heck yeah. But no, it wasn't really anything, because I was very dead set. I made good grades. I was a bad student, but I made good grades. I was a good test taker. I was in advanced classes. Like, I really did have my heart set on medical school all the way up until the point that I became a father. Like, it was literally the day that my son was born that I was like, this might not be the path anymore.
Yeah.
And that was just part of having a kid at 18, right? But I will say that, like, growing up around it, it was an interesting experience getting into real estate and starting getting on the phones and talking to people. I remember my first like week in the office, my dad stopped me at some point. He was like, "What are you watching? What do you like? Did you read something?" Just like, "No, I'm just getting on the phone, talking to people the way I've heard you talk to people in the backseat of the car for the last
That's
decade."
funny.
You know, like I don't know what to tell you. But I did find it was uh, something really honestly with my dad in real estate as a kid growing up. It kind of felt like I was related to like this famous person
Yeah.
because he did so much marketing and he spent so much time in this kind of niche community. Like his lead gen, even to this day, is almost non-existent. He's just very much in his community around the people that know him and he knows. And we would go places, and I've never been somewhere where my dad didn't get recognized, like internationally. Even like we've run into people like, "What are you doing here? How do you know this person?"
He's just shaking hands.
Yeah.
He's shaking hands, meeting people. He's becoming the expert in
Yep.
in the area, the sphere of influence that he has, and he
he's
just grows it.
He's a great big personality, which I think I like to say I get from him. But no, he's just really, really nice, personable guy that like a lot of people know. To this day, I still get, you know, I'm 30. I've been almost 30. I've been doing this since I was 21 years old. I still get like, "You're Tim's son, right?" Like, yep, that's my dad.
So really, what happened? You were learning via osmosis.
Yeah.
And you didn't even know it, and then by the time you got on the phone,
Yep.
he was like, "Wait a minute, like you've been listening to me all these years, and you sound like him. You're going through all the so you already had some of the same lingo and stuff too, right? You're probably saying some of the same things and
Oh
you
yeah.
know same tonalities and stuff like that, just because you've been around it.
And that was one of the things that I think came most naturally was just I used to say like I was silver tongued. Like I always had a really nice time talking to people, kind of asking questions, getting to know people that never really came to me as a hurdle. What came to me more as a hurdle than anything else was just the mindset behind sales and our sales career at all. Because I wanted to tell myself it wasn't sales at the beginning, but it was. Like it's sales. I'm selling myself. I'm solving problems. Sales isn't about convincing. It's about problem solving, right? And so my mindset was really, really terrible. And that's kind of what messed me up my first few years of real estate was aligning my mindset to this. Like it was not necessarily just about skills or talent. It was about getting the mindset right to be able to go in and do what I think is a very, very difficult job. I don't think that what we do is an easy thing to do. It requires a lot of consistency.
I think there's some value in that. People hear sales, and I know I started selling young too. I was like 17 or whatever.
Yeah.
Mine was martial arts, and that's kind of how I got introduced. But I remember just being like, feeling that like I got to convince somebody to do some shit. Like, okay, I got to make them do it. But then you're absolutely right. It's really not about that. It's the other way around.
Right.
And I think when someone, you know, if anyone's listening to this or hears that, like, if you're new to sales, like that's such a mind shift that's to say, okay, well, no, you're actually just problem solving because it's totally different. Your approach is different. You don't feel like you're forcing someone to do something like, oh, go ahead.
Car salesman.
Yeah.
Person.
I still hate car salesmen. Sorry, car salesmen, if you're listening to this.
I honestly think they're brilliant, man. I've got one car salesman who he got me like not that long ago, and I remember like telling him like, "Hey, you want to job in real estate?"
Yeah. So for that reason, absolutely.
Yeah.
But all the games, I'm like, oh, I hate the game part. Like that's the part I hate playing the game. So as much as I like sales, I hate playing the game. But it is problem solving, and that's you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So when you go and you meet a seller, and you're trying to figure out how can you solve it, take away the pain.
Yeah,
most people don't talk about that.
No. And one of the things that, because I've got a few guys who I'm managing now, very proud to say actually one of them just passed his real estate test yesterday. Congratulations, Andy. You know, it's the difference between listening to respond and listening to understand. The better you understand the problem and what you're working with, the more effective you're going to be, not just in communicating, but also like delivering, being able to service that person and helping them get to where they need to be. And finding a way that we can fit in and make a profitable situation out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Versus just follow the script, ask these questions. If they give you this response, this is what you say. You go to the next thing.
Yeah. I think, and people like I know I start sales wise. I always start with the script.
Yeah.
Just to get myself lined up.
Oh, sure.
Like okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But it never stays like that. You know, otherwise you're just like super robotic and you know whatever the situation is, and because the framework's the same, you can take the same thing from real estate to martial arts to widgets to whatever, the framework can be the same, and the script can, you just build it out,
Yeah.
and then you start working out from there. Like, okay, I'm gonna change it.
So I don't.
Um,
So as a manager of sales agents now, I don't teach scripting and conversations, really lead generation, the way I was taught it. The way I was taught it was basically like script accumulation. Like
mhm.
you get the script, you practice it, you use it, and then you make it yours. Now I use a broad spectrum template. So I've got a
Yeah.
template for a conversation, and it doesn't matter who you're talking to or why you're talking to them, whether you're in the grocery store talking to the guy in front of you in line, or you're talking to a motivated seller on the phone who called you.
Mhm.
It's pretty simple. Like everything starts with an introduction, like a really, really quick micro analysis of who it is you're talking to, whether that's reading body language or just listening to the responses on the phone.
Yep.
And then going into like, what their motivations are and finding connections in the motivations. Like, hey, what are you doing here today? How are you doing? And we use Ford questions. It's actually what's made, so like jujitsu has probably been one of my favorite hobbies. And it's paid for itself just in the time that I've trained, just
Mhm.
in establishing relationships with people and getting to know them and what they do. Like asking somebody, hey, what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
Just inherently creates the response. Like, this is what I do. What about you?
Yeah.
And it's a great little four-way. But yeah, no, it's typically something along the lines like, tell me about your family, your occupation, your recreation, your dreams. There's something in there that we can connect on. And then again, finding if there's a place where I fit in, where I can help. Um, but yeah, no, we've kind of done away with scripts altogether. It really is. It's something that like I do have a script for when I'm talking to people, but it's like it's in here, right? Like I could write it down, but I'm better
Yeah.
off just writing the outline and
Yeah.
just follow the outline.
Yeah, exactly. It's the outline. You use
Right.
the outline to get yourself
Sure.
to move, and especially when it's like for guys that are new and they're like, I've never don't know what to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
But I agree, asking the questions and
Right.
just kind of open stuff up. And
Sure.
you are right, man. Especially jujitsu, you meet so many people, on the mat alone. Just you get to know, and I mean, well, you got to get to know them because you're choking each other.
Yeah.
So, at
Right.
some point,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. You're there just like, hey, how's your wife?
Yeah, you got to get to know them. So.
Sure.
Man, so let's run through some deals a little bit.
Yeah.
So kind of give me. I always like to kind of start with like, what's something that sticks out in your head? Maybe it was like a screw up, or maybe it was just a difficult deal, or maybe just something that you look back and you're like, that was a lesson learned. I remember like that one sticks.
I'm fascinated by this question, right? So, I've got a few, and they could go so many different directions. They almost always tend to stem from like you talk about problems or mistakes. I don't even really see them as that. They're typically just obstacles that we run into.
Right.
Some of them are self-inflicted, right? There's a handful of them that may have been self-inflicted, but it's not really what we did so much as how we overcame it
Right.
that stands out to me. So like, there's a particular deal that I just closed last Friday, that taught me something new about intestate law. And I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to be one on television or anything like that. But I've been doing this so long, and we've done so many intestate deals that even my my escrow officer, who is amazing, she was stumped. We had this family attorney who was kind of sticking his nose in the deal, and he gave us a little education, which was really impressive, just about how things transfer. We had 5 brothers. Dad died intestate, but they probated for him anyway.
Mhm.
So he had an active estate. Mom died 10 years prior without a will, no probate, nothing. So we're going through the process of clearing title. Turns out the 5 brothers, between the 5 of them, have 5 judgments that amount to like $86,000, which most of it's child support.
Yeah.
Their net on the deal was $89,000. And so they went from like all celebrating like, yeah, we're going to get like $16,000, $17,000 checks each to like,
Nope.
no, you're going to get like $50 each. And I mean, like that was just like, so these are the deals that I really enjoy, because we talk about things that aren't fit for the MLS and people don't really understand what that means, I think, because it's not only, so not only did the property have a drug addict squatter in it,
Oh,
was missing most of its guts. It was just absolutely horrendous. When we got there, the squatter had a giant, like 95-pound blue nose pit bull that was just ready to rip us all to shreds. One of the 5 brothers is incarcerated. 3 of the 5 brothers had really, really, really bad child support judgments. And then one of the brothers, who was the executor, was just almost unintelligible. Like the poor guy, like we just couldn't understand what he was saying on the phone. He had a really hard time understanding things.
Mm.
I think he was the only the executor because he was the oldest of the five. But we were just like, the deal was about to blow apart. I spent so much time and money and energy. I walked them through the eviction process. I walked them through getting a writ of possession, through getting the constable out, getting her out, got a locksmith out, paid for the locksmith out of pocket. We did end up assigning that deal just because the amount of rehab was just really, really gnarly. It wasn't a deal it's still a deal, and it's a deal for somebody. It's just not a deal I wanted to commit to in the end. And we still managed to like turn a good profit on it, but it was going to blow apart. And I refused to let it kind of like, not at least without giving it the college try and get around those judgments. And so the way we got around it was mom died. And when she died, she, by definition, left all of her community property to her husband. And so instead of pulling each individual social security number for the children, we just had them pass ownership into mom, who was dead, to the estate. And so everything ran through the estate. And then from the estate, it can disperse a little bit differently without having to attract everybody else's judgments. It took like 5 different underwriters at title companies to get that title policy approved. And it was like not an easy deal, didn't close on time. It had tons of extensions. The number of like 4-way calls I had with the 4 non-incarcerated brothers of just like them screaming over each other, yelling, arguing. Like it was just this, like, I think they're still fighting it out on how to split up the money, but like neither here nor there. Like we worked really hard to make that deal work. And if that was on the market and you had a buyer who was like at a lender, that deal would have blown up 4 or 5 times over.
Yeah.
And so, there's things like that I really have a passion for, because I mean, otherwise those guys would have been walking away with $150 each. I mean, like there just wasn't going to be a way around it.
You were able to get around the whole thing.
Yeah.
Make sure that they got
just by
they
being
got paid.
patient and creative and focusing on their goals for it. And at the end of the day, like if they understood, like if there wasn't a way around it, there wasn't a way around it. And I was happy to let them go and say, if you guys want to come back and readdress this and try a different strategy or a different solution, I'm all for it. I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire and make you sell to me when you didn't know about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Or at least didn't know that it would attach to the property. I think they knew about the child. But no, that was just like a really good example of like a really, really gnarly deal, start to finish, from the condition of the property to the title situation. It was just really, really gnarly, and it was a really good just problem solver. And that's the stuff that I really like.
Just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
One thing I want to ask, because I know when we talk, when we talk, you always, and I think it'd be good for you to explain to those that are listening,
Sure.
is I know you're like, I remember one time you're like, I like to wholesale.
Yeah.
Can you run through that? Anyone that way someone's listening or watching, they kind of hear that term, because a lot of people they start and they're like, all they know is wholesale. They just like, I don't own the property. But I know that's like you've mentioned before, you're like, that's one of the favorite things you like to do. Run through that process.
Sure.
Wholesale.
Yeah, so I've got one that I did in Stephenville not that long ago that was like the perfect wholesale. Guy reached out to me. I had marketed to him for some reason or another. He has a property here in Fort Worth, but this was a property that he bought for his son to go to Tarleton for his baseball career. Well, the son moved on. Mobile home on 2 acres had been sitting vacant out in Stephenville for about a year. Next door neighbor was like trying to buy it. It was his old grandpa's house, all this kind of stuff. And guy reached out to me and just said, "Hey, I want 130 for it." That was it. He reached out to me kind of unsolicited, other than he was just responding to old marketing that I had sent him. It was like, "Hey, if you're still interested, I have this property. Here's the address. I want 130 for it." It was just easy deal, just done. Absolutely. And, he was doubling his investment on it. He wasn't really caring. He's like, "I know I'm leaving some money on the table, but I don't want to fool around with it. I don't want to do anything to it. Just take it." It was relatively clean. They had some dogs, so the carpets needed to be replaced. It was a double wide on 2 acres in Stephenville, like 10 minutes from the university. Next door neighbor was this really nice young kid. I ended up paying him cumulatively something like $350. He took pictures for me. He met the locksmith. He ended up taking care of my sign and mowing the yard and all that kind of stuff a couple of times. So we really took advantage of like the neighbors, but I actually never saw that property and never went out to it. Based it off of the pictures that the seller and the next door neighbor sent me. Bought it sight unseen, closed on it, used Ashley Bossy Thank you, Ashley. She's my hard money lender who I use for a lot of my deals. Um, and we bought it for 130. I turned around and put it on the market at 180, and it took a little while. It took like 6 weeks to sell, but we ended up selling it for like 175.
Mhm.
And they had some repair requests that we just put into the closing costs, which they were happy with. They managed to get a loan, and yeah, they're very happy with that house. But I maybe altogether put 2.5 hours into that deal.
Yeah.
And after everything was said and done and splits, I was walking away with like 35,000.
No repairs, nothing crazy. You just
Didn't even see it. Yeah.
just buy it, hard money, turn around,
So you even have to drive out there.
Yeah.
throw it back in the MLS, and see you guys later.
Yeah. And I mean, you could show this video to the seller and he'd be like, good for that guy. You know, he was happy. He's like, he
Yeah.
had his number in mind. He just didn't want to do anything to it. I solved a problem for him. And those are perfect. I've actually got a partner of mine who reached out to me recently with kind of an enticing offer. We've done a lot of deals together on like a JV capacity also, but he's like, hey, if you got something that you don't want to put your own money into, like, let me buy it and we'll just stick it on the market as is, clean it up. And because there's a lot of those deals that are moving that way. Like investors still buy on the MLS, especially like I would say smaller investors that aren't buying 10 properties a month, the ones that are doing maybe 10 properties every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Like they're still actively combing the MLS, and these are deals that are still appropriate for them.
Yeah.
And
There's stuff on there now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's changing. It's not
Yeah.
what it definitely wasn't what it was 3 years ago. Now
No.
there's actually like
good inventory. Yeah.
inventory. There's
Yeah, you have
room.
stuff to pick from. Yeah. And our philosophy has always been just if you price it right and market it right and your numbers are good. That was the hardest thing for me at the beginning, and it's the thing I think I excel at best now, is just being hyper aware to how much numbers change, how much investors' tolerances change over time.
Mhm.
There was a long time where it was very consistent. Like I could get, if I had the same deal back to back to back, I could get the same amount for it back to back to back, month over month, year over year, for like 5 years straight. Now it's like, if I had the same deal back to back 1 week over the next, I'm going to get different amounts for it
Yeah.
because it's changing so often. Just projections and tolerances
Yeah.
are all over the place. And so staying on top of that has been a challenge, but for the most part, no, we're just really good at making sure our numbers are on point. And when in doubt, we just don't buy. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of deals that we just don't move forward on because I just don't have that nice, warm, fuzzy feeling. But we swing it a lot. Yeah.
Something I want to circle back to. You mentioned Tony gave you 3 hours.
Yeah.
You know, something that and we talked about this was the last time I think we recorded a little bit. It's amazing how much in this game of real estate investing, guys are willing to just give up their time.
Mhm.
And I don't mean
Yeah.
give up their time, but
Sure.
they're willing to share their time.
Right.
And you know, you don't see that in a lot of things. And there's a lot of industries may not want to, you know, once they get the secret sauce to something, they don't want to share it.
Sure.
But it's so common in this industry that people they're like, oh yeah, I did this. This is how I did it. Like,
Right.
you know, and so
Yeah.
it spreads, you know, and you know, so when I hear that, you're like, well, he gave me 3 hours. He let me, you know, chit chat with him for 3 hours. Like that's so common, which is awesome.
Absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is still plenty of cutthroat players. Like I will say,
Right.
like, especially as
Yeah,
you
yeah.
like transition into like wholesale or like transactional investment real estate where you're holding stuff for less than a year. Yeah, like lots of snake in the grass. That was a thing that bit me kind of hard when I started going into that on my own. But no, I mean, KW was known for having a very open door culture, and it was based on 2 premises. The first one being that like this isn't easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. Like,
Right.
there's not too many difficult moving pieces. You can probably pick up everything you need to know, hardcore studying or in the field for in a year. You can get pretty dang good at this.
Mhm.
It's how difficult it is to be consistent and put things into action and to be a business owner and be an entrepreneur and stay aggressive and disciplined. That is the really, really difficult part. So it was always, you know, I'm happy to give you my whole playbook because 95% of the people in any given room aren't going to take action on it. They're
Right.
going to, it's just entertainment. Like, hey, I'm so glad I learned that lesson. I'm never going to use it, but
Yeah.
I'm so glad I learned that lesson. And then the other end was just, yeah, no, I was always very grateful for those people because no matter where I was in my business, there was always somebody there who was willing to invest time and energy into me, and sometimes even money into me, just because I asked, just because I was I was interested, I was disciplined, and I was, you know, giving them the respect for the value of their time.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's lots of that. And I haven't returned it enough. You know, like I
Yeah.
haven't given that back enough, but I've always been happy to like sit down and talk with people and show them what I'm doing. Again, because it's not like you could come in and steal my business from me. Like,
Right.
that's like saying like, oh, I'm going to come into your gym and I'm going to learn the moves that you learn
Yeah.
or that you know, and
Yeah,
then I'm going to
it's
come in and beat you. Like,
yeah.
that's not how it works.
It takes some time.
There's
man.
levels, right?
Yeah, there's levels of the game. No, you're right. You are right that there's a lot of people that will. You could give your playbook and you could watch. Like I agree, 95% of the people will go, "That was cool.
Yeah.
I won't do anything with it."
Yeah.
I like that. That's because that is something that is true. And then there's always that 5% that are like,
Yeah.
"Hell yeah, I'm glad."
Those are the ones I'm interested in, right?
Right,
Like, I want a partnership with them. Like,
and they're the ones that give back to and
sure.
all that stuff. And I agree with that. You eventually give, that's kind of what we do. You give back,
Right.
to those. It's your way of giving back. I mean,
Yeah.
once you give back, I tell people I know when I help somebody, I'm like, all right, hey, look, I'm gonna help you.
Yeah.
Once you succeed, I only ask one thing: pass this shit along.
Yeah.
Give it back to the next person,
Yeah.
and then we're good. That's
For
all I
sure.
want. I don't want
Yeah.
anything else. It could be jujitsu, it could be business, it could be anything. As long as you do that, I'm happy. But if you don't, fucking disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It helps that I also really like this, right? Like, it
Yeah.
helps that it's turned into a passion over time. Because I can talk about this for hours. If somebody came up and asked me a question, say, hey, let me pick your brain. I get excited. I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to know? When you reached out to me about the podcast, it's like, oh yeah, awesome. I'd love to do that. That's the kind of stuff I like. I don't get to talk about. It's like, especially since my wife left real estate. She at the beginning was like really interested in like hearing about it. She's like, you used to tell me everything, and I don't know anything about what's going on with your deals. And I was like, well, I sell a lot more now that you're not there.
Thanks, honey.
It's true, man. She was just a really beautiful distraction in the office, so I didn't sell as much while she was working with me. But it really is. It's one of those deals where I don't really have anybody to talk to about this anymore because me
Yeah.
and my dad drive each other crazy because we can't stop talking about work, which I'm grateful for. And then I've got the guys who I'm training now, and I say training, like a couple of like Jackson, he's taken off, man. He's gonna kill it. He's
Yeah,
gonna
I
do
saw
better.
him throw a wholesale deal up yesterday.
Oh man, I mean, like
I saw him post it. I was like, oh,
if what he's contracted, if what he contracted on Sunday closes combined with what he closed so far this year, I think he'll almost end up like almost. Let me see, is that right? No, yeah, he'll double what he made with Train in a year by the end of March. Which is what makes me like super happy. Like that makes me super happy is to like see a kid like that with that kind of work ethic, with that kind of like drive and discipline. And even like his days, he's like, oh, I'm just not feeling motivated. It's like, you got here at 8:30, man. Like you're here, you're showing up, you're doing the thing. Like your lack of motivation is awesome. Like your like low standard is so much higher than most people's.
Yeah. And you're never gonna feel. I mean, you don't.
No.
It's the mundane shit that happens.
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I gotta do it over again, or I mean, like you mentioned like the old marketing you put out.
Yeah.
You just put it out there, and then 6 months later, somebody contacts you. They say, I want 130, and you're like, well, all right, well,
Yeah.
let's talk. But you weren't sitting there thinking about it. Like, hope someone calls me. You just keep moving. You don't think about it. It's mundane. It's just over and over. Jiu-jitsu's like that.
Very much
all
so.
of it's like that. And that's why I think they relate so well.
It's man, that's been one of my favorite things about jiu-jitsu. It's tough, like where I'm at my stage of life now, that I don't get to train more often. And the days that I am free to train, the days that I opt out of training when I really should go anyway, like I probably need it. But it's crazy how much, you see the way in things, right? Like there's like, oh, the older I get, the longer I do things. It's like, oh, it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
It's all the same exact thing. Like if you're just like really disciplined and put your head down and focus on something, you can get really, really good at it. And then you get to play the fun game of prioritizing, like, what do I want to get really good at? What's important for me?
Yeah. Just over and over and over.
Yeah.
That's it. Just doing it over.
Yeah.
I want to ask about, I think this is definitely a good question for, anybody who has their license. And obviously, you like, wholesale, just kind of the way you run things, as far as leveraging the license.
Sure.
I know some people hear that and they're scared. They're like, I don't want to get my license. Like investors, I don't want to get my license because I've heard that before. They don't want to get their license because they're worried about, track and everything else and all the other stuff. So what are your thoughts? I mean, obviously I know your thoughts are, hey, have your license, but, versus, like, how do you navigate that? Saying, okay, I've got my license. Do you feel like it helps you even more?
Yeah. So I love being a realtor and I love working with realtors. I love being part of that community, especially because my dad's been in leadership. Like I did a 3-year tenure on the board of directors at Arbor. Like I'm more involved than the average agent, but not nearly as involved as some of the people that really truly get into leadership. There are some people who make full-time careers out of just being part of the realtor community. Their sales is a secondary thing.
Hmm.
Um, but I've really enjoyed being a realtor because being a realtor, it kind of legitimizes just transactional real estate in a degree that like it keeps it professional, it keeps the environment stable. They put a lot of money into the politics behind real estate and private property rights. Um, and so there's a lot about realtors being a real estate agent and being licensed and cooperating with the National Association of Realtors and state and local boards um, that I think has made me a better investor
Hmm.
10 times over. One, just because I'm educated on the retail market. Because that's the problem with most investors are dealing with off-market deals. They're not dealing with the end retail until, maybe like later investors, and even those, the ones that are cashing out, even
Yeah.
those are selling off market. And so understanding the retail market really well has helped me because that's one of the things, that's the feedback I would get as an early wholesaler was like, my comps were great. Like there was no doubt in my mind what something could sell for when it was done up and pretty.
Hmm.
And it was even on the conservative side. And so knowing those numbers really well going in made it to where I was a significantly more effective wholesaler, a significantly more effective investor, because I was very educated on what it was that I was buying. Um,
Do you feel like it helps you when you talk with people because you have a license and they're like, oh, well, we can trust him more than somebody else who's just,
it
you
honestly
know,
hurts me on the investment deals.
you think so?
Yeah, 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 yeah. It hurts me sometimes in the investment deals because it gives me, I have to overcome the objection of like, well, are you going to buy my house or are you going to list my house? No, I'm your buyer. I'm going to buy your house.
Mm.
I am a licensed realtor. This is what I bring to the table. These are options that I give you. And that's the thing that I think makes me better than, uh, I wouldn't say better. Let me backtrack that. What makes what I do more effective than what straight wholesalers or straight cash buyers are bringing to the table, which is I just give options. Like
Hmm.
I go in there and I tell most folks like, look, we typically have some idea of what the right way to go for you is based on what you've told us, the people we've worked in the past, the offers, the solutions that we offer. Um, but for the most part, like here's three numbers. Like here's what it looks like to put it on the market, do the whole song and dance, sign in the yard, open houses, represent you, negotiate offers, and get
Hmm.
you to the closing table that way. Here's what that looks like. Net, timeline, what you can expect, level of stress, everything else. All the way down to, or we'll just buy it from you, make you a cash offer, and we'll do some version of buying it, keeping it as a rental, selling the contract, selling, flipping and selling it, just depending on where we are in the market and in the timing. There's a lot of deals that we take title to, um, and end up either selling wholesale or wholetail or fix and flipping down the road. Um, and that cash offer comes with this timeline, this net, this level of stress and setting expectations there. And then we're also doing quite a few creative finance deals where we're coming in and saying like, there's an in between. Like you don't have to take this massive discount. You can still sell to an investor if you allow us to give us the opportunity to kind of leverage your debt or
Hmm.
your lack of debt in some situations. Um, and then that way we can kind of give people a few different options, give them the transparency behind it all, and pull back the curtain and say, look, here's really what's going on. Here's what we can expect to make on this deal. Here's what you can expect to make on this deal if in these three options, like which one works best. If none of them, great, that's fine. We don't have to be the end solution, but it at least gives us the ability to give them more than just the cash offer.
Yeah.
Because if all I have to offer is the cash offer, even if I just had cash and creative, there's a lot of people who like once they start looking at the numbers and how much like they're interested in cash, right? It's like, hey, I want a quick cash offer, and then they look at the numbers like, oh no, not really. And there's been plenty of folks where I'll try and talk them out of it. They'll still try to hit the easy button. I'll tell them like, your house looks great, show's great. I don't see any major repairs. You're a single young guy. You bought this as a single young guy. You don't have any like title issues to deal with. Why not just put it on the market?
Yeah.
Your timeline is roughly the same. Your level of stress is roughly the same, and your net is like $40,000 higher. And and I think that's one of the things that's really helped is particularly for wholesalers, because I do think wholesalers get a bad rap overall. The general notion is being a good salesperson is being conniving, being really deceptive, or at least skillfully deceptive, where you're able to kind of keep people in the dark just enough to where they'll make a bad decision that favors you.
Yeah.
I'm much more in the camp of like, I would rather give you all of the information for the same reason. Like
Yeah.
95% of people are going to go with what they were going to go with anyway. there's no amount of information I'm going to give someone and convince them not to do their original plan,
Hmm.
other than just educating them and let them know this is really what you're looking at. This is what you're deciding.
So because you have having the license, you can give options, and
Right.
that makes it easier for you to. That makes it. But your main overcoming is like the whole. You've had people actually ask you, "Are you going to buy this or not?"
Yeah. That's the biggest issue is like whenever
Like,
they see that I'm licensed, they kind of pump the brakes and go, hold on. We didn't want to list our house. It's like, I understand. And when I start having the conversation, this is what it looks like to look your house. It's pumping the brakes. Like, hold on. We don't want to list our house.
no.
And I think that's the thing that twists realtors up so much. And I kind of speak from personal experience and anecdotal because I'm talking to other realtors that do this, or that don't do this, that are just straight residential realtors, straight retail realtors. They have a hard time understanding why someone would sell at a discount. It just kind of blows their mind. They can't wrap their head around it. It's like,
Yeah.
no, there's legitimate reasons why people would sell for a discount, up to and including because they want to.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
That's really out there.
Yeah, there's ones that need to be sold at a discount. There's
Correct.
no other choice.
No, right. Yeah, that's the only way it works. And learning how to run numbers to appropriately list something at a discount is a lost art that I think people pretty much just lost 2012 to now.
Mhm.
Because you'll see a ton of realtors that'll just, they think, oh, maybe this house needs $30K worth of work. And so they'll take the full retail price and just list it like $30K short and think that does it. And then
Yeah.
it sits for like 180 days and they're scratching their head like, why isn't this?
Because that's not how it's
That's not
done.
how it works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to discount more than just that.
Correct.
They're thinking someone's going to come in. They're thinking someone who is wanting a turnkey property is going to come in and fix it.
Right.
They're like, oh, they understand it's going to be 30
Right.
grand worth of work, but it's not going to work that way. That it needs to be
100%.
like they're thinking like, oh, well, Misty's going to come in and fix it because she wants to live here and she's willing to put in $30,000, but they don't necessarily
You
want
gotta
that
have
work.
another place to stay during that time.
So those
Yeah,
buyers
You
do
gotta
exist,
finance
right?
They
that
exist. They
repair.
exist. Yeah.
But nobody makes business decisions off of those unicorns. And that's how I get a lot of folks that'll come to me either like at our consultation, because I don't even call them listing appointments anymore, because I just treat it as a consultation. We're going to go through options and we're going to decide together kind of what works best. But I get a lot of clients that during our consultation or after or down the road, they're like, I walked in not knowing much and walked out feeling very confident that what I knew was appropriate for the decisions I needed to make. Like, it's just about giving them an education and what they need to know. If I give them like a broad spectrum, like real estate tune up, like, their eyes are gonna be spinning, their ears not gonna work any well.
Glazes.
Yeah. But no, just being able to give them an education and let them understand, like, and there's a lot of times my education's uncomfortable. I'll tell them at the very beginning. That's one of my favorite scripts. I learned it from Chad Smith, one of my longest standing and most professional coaches that I hired. Was like, if at any point during our meeting I say something to you that makes you feel uncomfortable, I just want you to know this because I'm telling you the truth. And I would rather tell you the truth than candy coat something and give you false expectations. Because honestly, I'd rather turn you down now than let you down later. And that's honest, right? Like, that's a sincere desire. I don't want to candy coat anything for you. If we're working with the bare honest truth right now, then all that's left for us at the closing table are good surprises, not bad ones.
Right. Otherwise, things can blow up later down the road. You're like, oh, damn. I made a mistake. So
Right.
So let's talk about some, maybe not necessarily a home run, but just something that you stick out and you're like, that was a hell of a deal.
Oh, I've got a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a solar panel deal.
Uh-oh. Oh, let's do it.
Yeah. Oh, I love this one. This was it was on Rolinda Drive in Oak Cliff, towards the middle of last year. This was actually an expired lead. So we prospect really, really regularly in all different facets, everything from text messages, emails. I did quite a bit of snail mail and bandit signs at the beginning, especially when I first started getting into wholesaling. Bandit signs were a killer. I loved it. I don't do it almost at all anymore.
It's funny how marketing changes, right?
Really, yeah.
And that's in all industries. You'll start with this as kicking ass, and after a while, you're like, this shit doesn't really work as much.
I warn my guys because we're very text message heavy right now, and I'm just like, hey, like as what the rules that we're forced to comply with change, this may not be a lead source for us. So like, get comfortable and work hard, but know that like I'm always keeping my eye on the horizon.
Enjoy it
while it lasts.
And while it lasts, pump the shit out of that thing.
Absolutely.
You gotta be like, go, because otherwise, because shit changes.
Yeah, it does.
It just changes.
Yeah.
So.
But no, this was a deal that I called him as an expired, which is an old school. Like, I was there on the first of the month, picking up the phone calls one by one in the MLS, calling expired listings. This guy hired a friend as a realtor. It was his dad's house. Dad passed away, divorced, pretty clear title, other than the fact that, dad was dead, but we had one heir. That's who I was talking to. Nobody else involved, so it was pretty clean, other than the guy hadn't heard from his realtor in like 2 months. It was like one of those deals where like the agent didn't know what he was doing with a distressed property on the MLS, so he didn't price it appropriately and he didn't service it appropriately at all for what it was. He could have sold it in like 3 days.
Yeah.
Like, he should have sold that thing in 3 days. But it was just a combination of like that agent not knowing what he was doing, really, really poor marketing and pricing, nothing on the inside, etc. Anyway, I could go on for days about how bad of a job that agent did.
I'm sure others too. You'd be like this one and that one.
Oh, and we do.
Agent.
Yeah, we do all the time. Absolutely. It's good to do those case studies because it's like, there's people out like the minimum requirement for being a real estate agent is not very high.
It's this.
Yeah. Right.
You breathe. You're good.
Yeah.
Here's your license.
Exactly. And Guy and I ended up talking, and that was one of the things. He's like, oh, I don't know. I don't really feel like I owe this guy anything. I just want to make sure this doesn't come back. I called him and he had no idea. I was like, your contract with your agent expired yesterday. He's like, really? I was like, I knew it was coming up. I just had no idea. I was like, yep. At the beginning, his goal, dad had a little bit of debt on the property. His goal after everything was to like walk away with $90,000 at the beginning. And that's how he had it listed. It's obvious that's what he told his buddy, and his buddy threw it up there for that. Made no effort to educate the seller in that situation. Like 6 months before dad died, he got sold a solar lease, which was borderline criminal. I mean, like the guy was like on like his third cancer remission and like 82 years old, and they sold him a 25-year solar panel lease. I was like,
by the way, we know you're about to die, but you need this solar panel.
That was borderline criminal.
That's crazy.
And eventually we got to a point where I could only really afford, after we paid off the solar panels and everything else, the way the deal was structured, the guy was going to walk away with 50. He ended up coming back, and after I gave him like an education, like, hey, here's what we can expect. Here's the comps. Here's what I'm looking to make on the deal, what I might sell it for. He actually ended up knowing that we wholesale that deal during the transaction, because I ended up having a new buyer come to me. And I've got a great relationship with him now, Nat Tang. I'm looking to sell him another thing over in that area of Dallas right now. But he came to me looking for deals, told me where he was looking. I was like, oh, I've got one there right now. That looks kind of nasty. This might actually be a good fit. And I ended up going to the seller and telling him, look, here's the deal. The contract says 50, but you have, I think he had almost $30,000 worth of lease that was leaned against the property with the solar panels that we were having a really hard time getting around. I told him, here's the deal. If I can go get those solar panels off, that's what I was going to say. After we educated him, his new goal was 70. He's like, if I can get 70 out of the house, I'm good. And I told him, like, here's the deal. Like, I can get you 50, but here's the deal. If you agree to give me 50 and I go work my tail off to figure a way to get around those solar panels so that we don't have to pay them, can we split the savings? So it ended up being an extra $14,000 to each of us. So I ended up, I immediately sold the contract like 2 days later for, I think it ended up being like a $17,000 markup. It was a pretty solid markup. Again, the listing agent should have sold it. If he had just dropped his price like $20K, he would have sold it almost instantaneously. But again, he just didn't educate his client. And at that point, he still would have walked away with like $50K after closing costs and paying off the solar panels and everything else. And so I told him, like, look, this is pretty much the position. This was the best case scenario for you anyway, was you walking away with $50,000. So let's make it that $50,000, and then I'll work my tail off to get these solar panels removed. We did, again, by the grace of an amazing title company.
They actually removed the solar panels off the house.
I paid $2,000 out of my pocket to actually have Black Belt Luis's company come remove them from the structure, because the way the underwriter saw it is the lien didn't belong to the property address. The lien was filed against the decedent, against the previous owner, against the dead guy. And the only reason that the lien was attached to that address is because the fixture was attached to that address.
Right.
So if we could prove that there was no fixture, then there was no lien. And so I paid the $2,000. And at that point, we assessed, and the seller or the seller's son talked to his attorney and just made sure, like, hey, the worst thing that they're going to do is come after the estate The only thing in the estate was the house. Everything else was dead. So it's like, okay, you're selling this outside of the estate anyway. So the only thing that they could really pursue would be the estate. So he's like, I'm comfortable with that. Like, cool. He wanted to tell that solar company to go to hell, and he felt like that was the best way to do it. So I paid money out of my pocket to have them removed, and which was about $2,000. I paid $2,000 to have them removed and just put in a storage unit somewhere, and we ended up making like $31,000 on that deal because I made the extra 14 and he made the extra 14. So he made 64, which was just shy of his overall 70 goal of net. And I made 34 on the deal, and it just worked out to be like this perfect. It was a pain in the neck, and I was cursing solar companies and solar panel leases like the whole time. But I mean, that was one of those deals where I probably spent 14 hours on the phone, just like on hold with different companies, because the solar panel company wasn't really the person who held the lien. It was the finance company who was guaranteeing the lease and everything else. And so jumping through all those hoops was really rough. But just having a seller who was basically like, he's like, I'm in your hands, like, make this happen. Like, I'm happy with our worst case scenario. I was guaranteeing his worst case scenario, putting 50 in his pocket.
And you just made it happen.
And we just made it happen.
So did you? You said the solar panels went to a storage unit.
Yeah. So
And then
what happened there?
yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, where are those?
Are they being auctioned off?
No. If I'm trying to remember what the name
Or
of the company was.
Did he make the call and
The storage wars.
did the son make the call and was like, hey, just pick your shit up? Or
No, we never even told him. Nobody was paying on it. Nobody was paying on the lease. The guy was dead for a year, so they weren't getting paid on their stuff for a while.
So my address that you can drop that shit off at.
Hey man, if they called me tomorrow and said, "Where's our solar panels?" I'd give them the key and the combo box. Like, go pick them up, man. They're yours.
I'm gonna call you tomorrow and ask where your solar panels are.
Yeah.
So how much do you want for them?
Yeah,
How
right.
much do you need? Luis, if you're listening, I need you to install that.
Yeah, but no, that was a really great deal where we found a win-win for everybody. That guy was, happier than a pig in shit. Like we made that deal happen kind of out of thin air.
Yeah.
When I called him, he was like defeated. He was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this thing. I don't know if I'm gonna get anywhere close to where I was gonna get. And I didn't really try and beat him up either. I just told him like, hey man, here's the real numbers of what you were looking at. If I can make this happen, are you good with it? He was like, absolutely. I was like, okay, cool. And when I told him that we got the solar panels removed and he had agreed to split it with me, he had no problem signing that. Like we didn't even put anything in writing. I just told him like, if I go get this off, you got to split it with me.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, done. And there was like no enforcement, no nothing. Like they were off, they were gone. And he was happy to sign the amendment. I was like, cool.
That's killer.
Yeah, man, those are the good ones. I like those.
You just figured it out. I mean, he was just stuck.
Right.
Didn't really know what to do.
Nope.
And then you were like, hey, just one phone call.
Sure.
And then you're like, well, let me see what I can do. And you're able to get him more than what he was going to get.
Yep.
Sold it faster. And
and
that's awesome. And that's the advantage of having your license.
Yeah.
It was expired.
Yep.
Versus somebody who's
sure,
because you're not going to get that if you don't have your license. You don't necessarily go through that stuff.
He was convinced that his only way to go was on the market. Like he had no other way. And that's the thing that I run into a lot is you'll get people on both sides of the spectrum that don't even consider the alternative options. And the minute you kind of bring it to their consciousness, the minute you bring it up to them, like, oh, I don't know why I didn't think of that. It's like, because it's not your job to. Like you're drowning in this problem. You're not focusing on solutions, and you're not educated on the solutions. So, yeah, man, no, that was a great deal. That was just like a huge win for everybody. At that point, that was one of my biggest single assignments on a house under 250. Like that was like a huge assignment for like, I think the end sales price on that ended up being like 205. So to make $34,000 on a $205,000 house, that as far as like I'd been in it twice to like get the key and change the lockbox that was on there, and to like check on it before close, just to make sure nobody moved in and that the solar panels were removed.
So let me ask this, because you mentioned this the other day when we talked. So you're like all right, talking about starting to kind of hold some of these.
Yeah.
At what point did you say, man, because I know you doing a lot of transactions, a lot of wholesale, different stuff. What made you kind of get to that? Okay, I've got to. Her and I are so different. Like I hear your stories. I'm like, man, I need to get some more transactions. Like I need to go. I want to, because I'm not. Ours is like once we buy that shit, it ain't going anywhere. We're holding on to this thing.
Yeah.
We run it through the property management, and I'm like, good luck. Like I don't want to. To me, there was that. what do you call it? I love residual income.
100%.
I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
residual. Like that to me, I'm addicted to residual income more than I am the other side because I've had to do the hustle and the bustle and stuff and
Yeah.
just over the years, and I'm like, I like that residual, and so I try to build the residual up as much as possible on anything that we're doing more than the large checks and things like that. So we don't really sell anything. We're not like when I say sell, like we don't like we buy it and then they go, we've thought about it like,
Sure.
oh, you know what, maybe we should sell this and go bigger. And I'm like, oh, man, I can't
Yeah.
go with this thing.
Yeah,
We hear
yeah.
so many stories from these older investors
Right.
that we've known that they all say, I wish I wouldn't have sold that. And I just don't want to be that guy to be like, damn, I wish I would have sold it. So that I have that very old school mindset of like, let's just hold on to everything. But what made you eventually kind of get that switch? Say, let me slowly kind of keep some of these with me.
So the itch was always there. Like it was always like there from the very beginning as a young man. If anything, it's the opposite. I was so focused on transactional real estate because that was my career. That's still my background, and it's still my bread and butter is
Right.
transactional real estate. And so, it was probably a combination of like mentors and fear. Like a combination of mentors and fear. Like my original mentors were pretty heavy transactional real estate guys also.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very much like a churn and burn. The longest you held something was to flip it.
Mm-hmm.
And that would always be the numbers that we would run. Like, okay, here's how much we make if we take it down, do the work, flip the property. And there was plenty of those that just that number alone justified it. Like, doesn't even matter. Like, cool.
Yeah, we're not holding that shit.
No. Bye. Versus like, hey, how much could we make if we closed on this thing in 3 weeks and just sold the contract? And that was always the battle that we kind of had in mind. And what flipped the switch was really, I want to say it was like my kids, and it was like one particular month that we were doing well. My transactions were great. I think it was right after COVID, so maybe 2020, that I had a completely dry month. I had like a completely dry month.
Yeah.
And I hadn't had one of those in a while. Like at the very least, I'm closing a deal. And, having a completely dry month and really stressing about money in a way I hadn't stressed about money in a few years at that point. Because like, you get to a certain point in real estate and any sales where you get good enough at it, you always have this like underlying feeling of like, it's like being a good fisherman. Like I know how to catch fish. I know how to go earn an income at this. I know what to do. I know how to go make it happen. How long it's going to take only depends on how long or how hard I put into it and how consistent I am. So, the switch really came from understanding that like I'm going to be in transactional real estate for the next 50 years, against my will if I don't switch it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, first forays were really looking into creative financing because that's always the thing that I balance delicately is I'm very cash conservative because I've had enough of those dry months in my career before that 2020 dry month that I don't ever really want that to happen again. So we're very, very conservative with where we put our cash. And that's always been the thing that's gotten me. And so really getting into deals for as little cash out of my own pocket as possible has been really just the only thing that's kept me from buying everything that I see.
Yeah.
And so now as we're expanding and we're allowing other people to invest in our deals with us, I'm just going haywire. Like it's just like I want to buy everything. I
want to keep it.
Locked up that lot over the weekend that Jackson got. And I was like, let's just buy it. I can go find $30,000 right now. Let's buy it right now. We'll just hold on to it until it's worth $200,000 because it's worth $100 right now. I was like, let's hold on to it until it's worth $200. And yeah, no, and that's not even a residual income situation. That's just like, hey, I like where I'm buying that thing at. And that's always been my mindset is because I am good at transactional because there is a lot of abundance. 99.9% of the deals that we do are direct to seller. We're finding them, we're negotiating with the seller because that's the thing that has kept me going is that my passion is what I'm good at and what I'm good at, I'm passionate about. Right.
Right.
And it's always kind of been problem solving directly with the consumer, directly with the member of the public, whether they're a seller or a family member or whatever it is. I really enjoy that aspect of it. And so that's really what keeps me in transactional is that I get a deal, we solve the problem, and I'm trying to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
But flipping the switch really came from like, okay, this isn't going to last forever.
You can't retire.
See, I always admire guys that like when I hear stories of, the transactional stuff because I had such an opposite mindset where I was like, I don't want to, I want to be able to be I think we were like 31. I was 31, 32, and we could just cut it loose and be done. Like
Yeah.
that was it. I could retire.
Yeah.
And that's all I wanted.
Sure.
So now if I want to be like, I want to do a shit ton of transactions, I don't have to worry about
Right.
a dry month isn't going to kill me where
Right.
I'm like, fuck it, I get a dry month, let's go. You know, like
Sure.
it just keep it moving. And that was, it's funny you said that. You're like, I'm going to be, or I like the way you put that. You're like, if I don't do this, I'm going to be in transactional real estate for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to think about, especially if then if it's all transactional, there's nothing left to pass to the kids.
Right.
Because once you die,
Yeah, that's it.
there's nothing held. All that, you'll have money to pass, obviously, but there's nothing,
Sure.
there's nothing, no assets to go with
Think
that.
about-
To
So
appreciate.
to
Yeah.
appreciate, to pass on. And so I hear that and I'm like, it makes, I mean, your reason for switch, or not switch, because you're not switching, but the reason for adding it in or just
Yeah.
putting it into action makes sense, because that's, I hear that, I admire that, because it's just, I was always the opposite of like, you're like 17, 18, 19 being told you got to retire young, live
Yeah.
to retire young. And
Yeah.
so that's why we held everything.
Sure.
But when I hear these, I hear people's, that's why I like the podcast, just meeting individuals, I always learn through doing this. This
Right.
is my give back as well. And, to hear that and go, okay, because I want to have those, I know that in order to get to certain spots, you are going to have dry months, but
Yeah.
that's why I'm so big on that residual,
Sure.
like property management and all those things. Cause there's not a lot of areas, even on the realtor side, that are residual
Right.
income.
No.
There's not. There's property management's one of the very few.
And even that,
And-
like there's like the cost to get to that passivity is,
Yeah.
is pretty high, right? Like,
Mhm.
you're still having to be a property
You
manager.
still have to
You're
be
done.
it. Yeah. To fully let go of it. Absolutely.
Right.
It's like the only little section that in real estate that you can actually, like, if you have a license, you can actually have the residual income. And I
Sure.
mean, unless I'm missing any, I don't think there's really any other areas that have that residual income.
Any of them that claim to that I've seen personally have been bells and whistles. And I've been doing this long enough
Yeah.
to I've been around the block
There's
at
not
least
really-
once. Yeah, no.
They're all transactional. They have to
Yeah.
be at some level. And I mean, you make damn good money. I mean,
Sure.
I don't get me wrong. We still utilize the license and, do sales and stuff like that. But,
Yeah.
we're not as heavy as some individuals, not heavy as like you are, so that's why I like hearing those, like,
Yeah.
because it's a different game. It's
is.
a completely different game when you're going to that, I'm going to just bam, 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 one and done, next. So it's interesting you made that switch. So now, are you just going game by game? Do you have a game plan? You're like, hey, I want to, hold X amount to a certain point, or what's?
Yeah. So cumulative net worth, I'm shooting for 10 million by 35. So that's been the goal, is to get to 10 million in net worth by 35. I am maybe like 20% there.
Yeah.
So like that's kind of the hard fast goal. And I think if I end up under projecting and end up getting like close by like 32, I'll probably double it.
Do you feel more breathing room now, just on the transactional side versus? Like,
Oh my God. Yeah.
like you feel
Oh
that,
my
like
God, yeah.
like the weight off your shoulder, like
It's not even really like the residual is like next to nothing really compared to like what
you're
we
not-
can turn and like what we can turn
Right.
into months, but like it's the access to capital, it's the access to
Mhm.
to having like a net worth behind you a little bit.
Yeah.
Is really cool. I mean, like just pulling something as simple as like a HELOC on my house to redo the kitchen and not really like worry about it. It's like, okay, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Like having something to like leverage against.
You're not always gonna, guys that are doing rentals, we're not always rolling around Scrooge McDuck money. That's not it. I mean,
No, it's
not
almost the
vi-
opposite.
It's
right?
almost the opposite, but
Yeah.
but with that, you get that security that you can kind of sit back and just
Sure.
go. I mean, we took 2020 the fuck off. Like we just 2020 hit, and I was like, done. That's it. I think I don't know. We sat on the porch a lot, right, Misty? Like,
Yeah. Or went to the park with the boys.
dude, we didn't do shit.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't have to do shit. We
Yeah.
didn't have to do this. We didn't have to do anything because of all the years prior. That's actually how all this podcast started, was
Sure.
because of that. Because we were like, man, we took 2020 off,
Get
and
takeout and go sit at the park.
dude,
Yeah.
but I know if we were running transactions and stuff, man, I'd been nervous as hell.
So I
It'd be
don't
hard to sleep.
take things off. I take work with me everywhere I go,
Right.
which has like its ups and downs. But it's been nice for me because I'm kind of in a similar boat. Like I do miss, like I have 4 kids, so I miss the occasional baseball game here and there. But for the most part, I'm at almost everything. And sometimes I have to take a phone call. We were at a talent show the other night, and like I'm just sensitive. I'm careful. I'm like, okay, cool. How many acts do I have before Jackson and Allie come up? All right, cool. I got to go call this lady real quick. and I'll like being able to like set good expectations and manage my time well allows me to kind of do that. Like there are plenty of days that I
Yeah.
just hang out with my wife, and that's a lot of fun. And there's plenty of days that like we're talking about taking a vacation. My wife's like, why don't we just go to like Europe for like a month? I was like, we could, especially now that I've got like a pretty solid team, like we could, but that would honestly stress me out because I want to be here.
Yeah,
Like
you
working
want to
and-
move.
yeah,
you want to
yeah,
move
yeah.
forward. I'm with you. You're like,
Um,
no, there's no. You're not full time. You're not part time. You're
Right.
just anytime and all the time. Like,
Yeah.
and you want to like. Do you get that? I know. I
I
have.
get antsy.
I get antsy. Do you
Yeah.
get that antsiness?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
you're like, I gotta move forward. I gotta move forward.
Yeah.
It's a Sunday, and you're like, shit, I gotta do something, man. I can't.
My wife saw
Can't
it this.
sit here.
My wife saw it like this past Sunday because like I literally and I have a very Latin mom, and so I grew up like if I heard like Latin music or like the smell of oh man, what's the purple floor cleaner? I wish I could Fabuloso.
Fabuloso.
If I smelled Fabuloso and like heard a vacuum and some like Latin music downstairs, like I knew she was pissed off. But that's what it was. And God bless my wife because like I don't clean the way I should, and it's because I had someone who cleaned really well for me my whole life. So it's not a habit I have like built in. But like I got up and started vacuuming the floor on Sunday just because it was like, all right, I'm already through the weekend. I need to like get to work. I
Yeah.
don't want to go to the office and like abandon my family here. I'm gonna stay here. And I just started vacuuming. And I was just getting more and more angry, just like looking at all this stuff, like there's Play-Doh in this new floor. Like, where's this sticker coming from? And so like I instantly felt like sympathy for my mom because it's like this is why she was so angry every time she was cleaning. But no,
You feel that urge to move forward. You
I
feel that urge,
always,
like you have to.
always.
There's no giving. Like it's not about the amount of money, or it's not about it's just it's whatever it is. You're just like, I got to build. You feel like you've got to keep it going, otherwise
it's staying in like a broke mindset, right? Like it's like this
Yes.
nice delicate balance between like there's abundance, there's plenty out there for me and everybody else. You just have to go get it. And the like if I don't, I'm gonna go broke really quick.
right. Yeah.
And
It's a curse, right? You're like, let's work for ourselves, and then you realize, oh shit,
like,
this,
oh man,
it's the other way around. You're always on it.
I have this horrible joke that my wife hates when I tell all the time because I tell them, it's like people ask me what it's like being in real estate. It's like, it's okay. I like it a lot. My boss is a dick, but it's okay because I'm sleeping with his wife.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it, man.
Yeah.
I get it. It's because you're never wanting to just sit down. Like,
No.
I struggle to just sit down and watch TV or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
unless it's for a nap, it has to be on purpose. Like, okay, I gotta take a 10-minute nap and wake up and just keep moving. There's never a day off.
No.
I mean, there's never like you can't just take that time off.
No, and I don't really like. I even thought to myself as I was like taking a phone call at like 8:30 on Sunday that I knew was a real estate agent. I was like, this should be sacred time, but nothing else was going on, and it's the same thing. Like that's the only thing I've had to learn over time is just be sensitive. Like don't pick up a phone call in the middle of a movie. Don't step out of anything important. It's like everybody's kind of doing their own thing in the house right now. I'm gonna take this phone call. It's not that big of a deal.
If you didn't do that though, time would move very slow.
It would.
Yeah. I'm sure things move fast. I know you mentioned you had your first child and you're 18. Now time probably just went right by you. You look back and not in a bad way, but it's just because you're just moving forward. You're
Right.
moving forward versus if you just sat there all those years and maybe you didn't do what you were doing now or do all those years, you'd be like, man, it took a long time for you to get to this age, kid. Like
it was honestly really bad anxiety that kind of like we talk about like what flipped the switch and what had me thinking about the future was just like was this kind of weird bout of really bad anxiety that hit me post COVID. That I just for whatever reason became like hyper aware of how quickly time was passing and how like realistically close to death we could potentially be. It's actually I think it was after Ted passed away.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, like I don't have a guaranteed 85 years to get this all sorted out. Like this could be over tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then like looking at my kids and like my oldest is 12 and it's like I can close my eyes and he's 4. Like, like it's just it was yesterday. And so it is becoming blinding how quickly the kids are moving on. And I've actually kind of changed my perspective even on being in business with my dad. Because I used to tell people, especially when we first started the brokerage a couple years ago, it was like, oh, I own and operate a small brokerage in Arlington. It's like, no, my dad owns and operates a small brokerage in Arlington, and I manage it because I'm in no rush to not be in business with him anymore. I'm very grateful to be in business with him. And I think for a long time, I viewed me getting him to retirement as a goal. I was like, that's what a son should do. If we're in business together, my goal is to get you like feet up on a beach somewhere as quickly as possible. But now, like looking back on it, like I want to stay in business with him as long as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Because it's going by too quick.
It's funny you said that, because that's actually one of my goals, to be able to get my dad not to retire, like so he can just quit, but he's been in the same position for many years, but so that he can do what he wants.
Yeah.
So he can. Yeah, he's just got his license
Yeah.
himself.
Oh,
He loves.
sweet.
He's been selling
Awesome.
trucks for ever. The guy's
Super
just,
translatable
so
skills.
so he's one of those guys
Yeah.
that will walk into a place and will just say, hey, he's very door-to-door sales guy. He's
Yeah.
not a phone guy. He's literally like door to door. He's
Yeah.
been doing it for years, but he's in higher management. He's higher management now where he's at. He's part of corporate, and so
Yeah.
he's been up for years. And so I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Like, you want to get them to where they can be able to just walk away and go, okay, I'm done.
Right.
Or they can do what they want.
Sure.
And so that's, I don't hear that much, but that's something that I feel in myself. I'm like, I got to get him to a point where he can just do what he wants to do.
I'm close, right? Like, so I'm close. My dad's worked really hard, and I can't take credit for any of the hard work that he's done. But especially these last 2 years since starting the brokerage, and especially since we kind of I had some sputtered starts with some agents that I was managing originally when we first started the brokerage. Because I'm a pretty independent guy. Like, I like
Mhm.
being able to just put my head down and work. And so as passionate as I am about teaching, as passionate as I am about making sure that my guys succeed, if I'm not getting the feeling that like that's being appreciated appropriately, then I'm like, okay, well, my family comes first. Like, putting a roof over my kids' heads
Right.
and feeding them is the ultimate priority. But I think this last year was the first year that I've managed to like really put my dad in a position where he can sit down if he wants to. Like,
Mhm.
and that was really, really cool. And, he's bought a couple beach properties. He's got more investment properties than he does like now than he had pretty much my whole life. I think like he kind of famously had like 2 rental port properties in his portfolio pretty much his whole career. He had one that his first house in Texas, he
Mhm.
just held on to forever, which he actually 1031'd into his beach house. So yes, upgrade your investments. That's okay, man. It's all right to do.
Misty, are you ready? I want Miami, man. I'm just telling you, I fucking love Miami.
I love Miami, man. That's some of the best food you can get in the country. And then another one that was actually just kind of like a thorn in his side that he bought and sold kind of like in a bad time frame. I remember like having a leaf blower and helping him clean up that house. It had like it was in Wedgwood, so it had foundation problems,
Yeah.
and plumbing problems, and I think he sold it in like 2013, so things really hadn't kind of recovered yet. Or maybe it was even earlier than that. So he like bought and sold inside the same recession drip, which was rough. I think, I wasn't too privy to it then, but other than that, like he didn't really own many properties. And then now, we've actually got the way I have my team structured, and I'm very happy with it, is like every deal. So that's one of the hardest things I think most people don't understand. And our business model is a little bit different, but I've formulated it around keeping it fair for our guys, because I want to see our guys succeed. I want to see them build net worth and build to their own level of financial freedom.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I get 3 freebies a year, and so does everybody on our team. They get 3 deals that if they come across that they want it as a personal home, personal investment, something that they feel passionate about, and they want it outside of the company, it's theirs, 100%. Whether that's retail or wholesale or whatever it is, or a buy and hold,
Mhm.
they're entitled to 3 personal deals a year. But then everything above and beyond that, my dad gets a chunk of. Like, the company gets a chunk of.
Right.
So like there's pretty much any deal that I come across, even that Stephenville deal, my dad got a 30% override just for being dad and boss. And like, it used to drive my wife nuts.
Mhm.
Like, and I think I can say that openly now. Like, she would regularly look at like our team splits, and she's like, "Why are we paying your dad so much money?" I was like, "Because you don't understand how many times he paid our light bill. You don't understand how many times."
It's your give back as
Yeah.
a son. It's your as weird as it is. Well, some people may hear it and be like, that doesn't make any sense. But but I'm sure plenty of people hear that and go, it's your give back. It's
Yeah.
you saying, hey, you know what? Because you did all that stuff for me, and here it is.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
And so I think that helps. I'm sure, just Dad worked a lot, man,
Yeah.
and so you're like, all right, now it's my time to switch
Sure.
and shift. So
Yeah.
let me ask, do you have brothers and sisters? Or are you the
I have one
only
brother.
one
I
brother?
have one brother. I take that back. I have 3 brothers. I have one brother from my mom and dad, and then I have 2 older cousins who they lost their dad at a very young age, and
Yeah.
then my aunt. I actually have her name tattooed on my chest. She was like a second mom to me, and she passed away when I was 15.
Yeah.
But we were raised together. We spent weekends together. They're older enough to where like when I started getting into like early teenage years, they were too old for me.
So you're the baby.
No, I'm the older of my 2 brothers.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So my younger brother is the baby of the 4 of us, but I had 2 older cousins. They're the ones who got me into bartending and everything else.
There's always that one sibling who's like, they call them, that's like the one. They're like, they're the one that's going to change everything.
I think that's me.
And that's you.
Yeah, I think
That's
that's
why I
me.
asked that, because there's always that one. I got 2 brothers, and
Yeah.
and they're not like me. They're not like that.
I tell my brother all the time because my brother's on the team and he sells real estate. He's licensed. But he's young guy, has a girlfriend and a dog,
Mhm.
and you know that's his responsibility in life. And he's got a house. He just bought a house, which is awesome. I'm very happy for him.
But you shoulder the other stuff.
Yeah.
You shoulder. You're like, I'm going to take this on. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be the one to make sure that this all changes.
Yeah, 100%. And I've tried to get my cousins on a couple of times as well. In fact, I just talked to my cousin about investing with me like this past weekend. He was like, we were just talking about it. I don't know. I just looked at him. I was like, hey, you got like 20 grand lying around? I got this deal that I'm looking to buy. He was like, yeah, why didn't you think of, because he's a bartender. Him and his girlfriend like stack cash away. They just
Yeah.
have a ridiculous amount of like actual cash. And I was like, you don't do that. It's a terrible idea.
You're like, I can put that to work.
yeah.
But
yeah.
I like that though, because that's something too that I don't think is talked about a lot. And that's kind of where I know what we're talking about here is real estate, but there's so much more. There's the mindset, there's all that stuff, because there are those individuals like you are the
Yeah.
one in the family that's making the change. You're like, I'm going to make sure that whatever goes on from here, and I'm sure one of your kids
Yeah.
will be that one that's going to, you don't know which one,
I don't.
but one of them is going to be the one that's going to say, I'm going to make sure that, my parents can kick it and sit
Sure.
back, and they're going to make so whatever you built, there's going to be that one that's probably going to end up that's going to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
So when you're done,
Yeah.
they're going to be able to go through and say, well, let's take it even further than what Dad did.
The only thing I wish my dad would have done differently with me that I'm trying to do differently with my kids, and I would say pretty much every good quality I have as a father, like I got from my dad. Most of my toxic traits I got from my mom.
Fabulous.
Angry cleaning.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. I got that Latino in me like real bad, unfortunately. But one of the things I wish he would have done differently that I'm trying to change is teach sales skills,
Mhm.
or just at the very least the importance of sales skills. Because it's not something that like you don't have to be a salesperson, but
Yeah.
like understanding and knowing how to negotiate and the tools available, and even just hustling, just a general hustle. If you're like because there's plenty of times that I had cool ideas in my head, and like even my oldest son, he's really into robotics, and he's really into like he's brilliant, really really smart. Like he'll invent some game changing thing someday. But as far as just being able to like sell something and manage money and understand like, hey, like there is opportunity everywhere. And so like I got my daughter set up right now. She was like asking me to go to camp. I was like, you can go to camp. In fact, I will. And it's the same thing. Like I offer her equity partnerships. I offered all my kids
Mhm.
equity partnerships. Like Camp Thurman's $300. If you raise 100, I'll double what you put in. So
Mhm.
you put in 100 and I'll pay the other 2. And she was, and, at first it started with the same mindset that I see in adults. Like, oh, how am I supposed to do that?
Yeah.
I can't even get close to that. It's like, what do you mean, baby? There's opportunity everywhere. She's like, how am I supposed to make $100? I was like, I don't know. What do you have in your room right now? You have anything you could sell? She's like, I don't want to sell my stuff. Okay. Do you have anything that you could go find for cheap? Like, what if I just went to the dollar store? Do you think you could find something at the dollar store that you could sell for more than $1? She's like, yeah, but who am I going to sell it to? I was like, I don't know. What are your friends like? Candy. Oh, all right. Go get some candy. That's great. So she's got a little candy flipping business. We go to Costco, buy the big bag of candy, and she's selling them 50 cents a pop. Like I think she's already like almost very close to her like $100
Opens up
goal.
the bag. Does she wear like a big coat to school? And open it up. You're like, all right, guys,
I
this is
do-
what my selection
I
is
do think about
today."
that sometimes. It's like the kind of hustle that I'm teaching you, it does have a cross application for sure.
Yeah, she got the hooks. They're gonna go buy the jacket. She's gonna raise enough money to buy the jacket to put hooks in,
Yeah.
and then like, put all the candy and just kind of open it up and be like, yo.
But I think the problem always was that my dad was such a natural salesperson because he was so communicable. He was just, people really gravitated to him. He had one of those personalities that like much like me, like never hard sold anybody in his life. I don't think. I think his was very much like let's talk, let's get to know each other, let's see if doing business together makes sense, and then we'll worry about solving your problems. Like that was never really. It was never like, hey, hire me, I'm the best. This is the guy I am. Here's what you're looking for. And so that was one of the things that I really benefited from, as far as, because, as much as I can almost brag that, like, yeah, I sounded really good on the phones when I first started in real estate, it didn't amount to much. Like, I took advantage of that talent to a degree to where I wasn't really doing much beyond that. It was just like, I was really good at talking to people on the phone. I was crap at setting appointments. I was crap at getting the motivation. I was just good at building rapport. And so being able to get to the heart of what people are looking for and how to solve problems and how to sell something effectively was like a really big deal that took me 4 years of doing real estate to kind of like figure out like, oh, this is important. Like I should put as much time and energy into getting good at this as I do other things I care about.
The funny part is that never changes. Like you're always going to get better.
Yeah.
There's always something else in sales to go, I can clean this up.
Who is that jujitsu fighter that was like, who's like, I've learned everything need to learn from jujitsu. I've learned everything jujitsu has to offer. I'm going to go focus on Muay Thai now. I can't remember who it was.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's just, but there is stuff like that where it's like that's just arrogant beyond belief. You absolutely know it. Like you've scratched the surface.
I still love looking at other people sell systems. Like there's still like because there's always someone in there that has something like that was slick. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can have all the fundamentals, and then somebody says something or the way they say something or what they say or kind of how they structure their their process or whatever. Like there's always something more to learn. So you're teaching that your kid, you're handing that to the kids and saying, hey kids, you guys got to learn how to sell.
Oh, it's just amazing how much that's like, learning basic accounting.
Right.
Like learning, like, hey, do you know how much potential you have in that little bag of candy that you just got from Costco? Count it out. How much does everything cost? How much did you buy everything for?
Yeah.
Even cutting them little, I loaned her. I said I fronted her. I fronted her first bag of candy, and she flipped it real fast. It's like that's a neat little thing you just did. And then my oldest son picked it up. He's flipping airheads, and he's got competition now. He's inspiring competition in his market.
Jake would love that.
And
I'm like, all right, Jake, we're gonna take it to the next level. We're gonna buy some baggies. we're gonna get you a credit card to start slicing some shit.
I mean, but it's really brilliant. I've become extremely passionate about just businesses in general.
Yeah.
Because I'm always fascinated to see how certain ones work. Some of them boggle me. Like I still don't, like I call my insurance agent all the time. Like, how do you guys make money? Just walk me through this. How do y'all make money again? Because it's so obscure. But like little things, like one of my best friends, Michelle Renfro, she does lashes, and her and our other group of friends, I sold them their salon. It's Roots Beauty Bar in Arlington. And they, as far as what Emily and Abby do, as far as like hairstylists and things like that, I see them as like a limited capacity because they're fully booked all the time, which is great. They're very successful. You couldn't get onto Emily's book if you wanted to. She's 4 months out, which is awesome. But then you get things like Michelle, who's doing lashes and just talking through her profit and loss, her time allowance, her average hourly rate. And then now she's kind of transitioning into doing like spray tans. And like going from like a 2-hour, $30 session to like a $60 10-minute session, it was like the return on that is like, oh, you should buy more equipment. You should buy more equipment and like 100 times that. And so like little things like that, I just get, or even like I probably have too much business input for people because it's fascinating because it's other people's stuff. It's like, have you ever thought about doing this? Like, this would be so interesting.
I do the same shit. You literally break their business down in your head. And
yeah.
You're going, if you just did that. And then if you're not careful, you'll be like, oh man, I just bought a tanning machine.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like when Misty hears stories like that, she's like, oh no. I know Misty's over there going, please don't do it, Story.
Not another thing.
Don't do it. Because I know one is like, I like when we go to get a haircut, I'm always like, so Miranda, you ever thought about opening a salon? It's really just real estate. You don't actually have to be the one cutting the hair. You just stay like it's already in my head. I'm like,
you rent the chairs. They're doing great. They bought this salon. Their business model is awesome. Like you need to figure out how to get more chairs in there.
It really is a real estate business model. You get the salon, you rent the chairs out, and that's all it is.
The one thing that I would say it does. The biggest thing I would say that Emily and Abby that were really smart and which made them as successful as they are was that they put in so much grunt work. Like
Mhm.
Emily was working out of her mom and dad's, like they owned Ace Volleyball, and they had like a little tiny salon studio space, and she literally worked from the ground up and built herself up to like multiple thousands of followers on Instagram. Same thing, had really booked out to the point where she needed to duplicate herself. She needed a partner. She needed another set of hands.
Mhm.
And then just she literally keeps the people, her value add to the people that come and rent space from her was when they were getting started, they offered lower rate with the immediate expectation, like the minute you're off the ground, our prices are going up.
Yeah.
And here's what they're going to be. And two was that like she had so much overflow that she could just keep people fed. And we would call it in Keller Williams or in just real estate in general, like a rainmaker. She was literally just making it rain
Mhm.
and couldn't collect all of it herself. So she had to bring other people in to kind of help fill those seats. And I think that's what a lot of people get lost on, especially younger guys, is that like there is always going to be a certain amount of shit you have to eat before anything's going to happen for you.
Yeah.
Like, and you might get lucky and it might not be that much, and you might be average and it's going to be a lot. And you know, it's going to be a lot.
I like one of the things I think about is because it kind of ties in, and that's why we went full time in real estate was
Yeah.
because spending all those years teaching kids and stuff like that, that shit's hard to scale. I can't duplicate myself
Right.
and go, all right, here we go. Here's another story. Boom. He teaches just like you.
Sure.
He's got all the same attributes and can do everything you do. That I mean, I've tried to duplicate myself as a coach, and that shit's hard.
Yeah, you can't.
And then we've had a second school, and that was a long time ago.
Wow.
And that shit was hard.
Yeah.
And that thing closed down. But with real estate and and that model of things, you can scale.
Yeah.
You can scale, and I think at some point, I know that's why we got into rentals and stuff, and we kind of stood more in that area because it was easier to scale over time at the pace that you want
Right.
versus where you don't have to be there every day. Whereas the other way, you've got to be there every day. And if you don't show up, you don't make a sale,
Right.
nothing happens, nothing grows. But those business models, I used, I guess too, I dream of things much larger than what Misty does. Sometimes I'm always pushing that. But I think that's such a, because you've got those different things, right? You've got your self-employed where you work for yourself. So it's
Right.
all transactional, boom, boom, boom. But then once the mojo stops, everything stops.
Yep.
But then eventually being able to go past that. And we spent so many years doing that where we were like, man, I'm just tired of the grind. And so by the time 2020 hit, that was when we decided,
Yeah.
I'm done with it. I ain't going to do that anymore. I want to be able to scale something and be able
Yeah.
to spend time doing.
Create a business, not a job.
That's the difference. And most people, they start out,
Yep.
they get there, and it could be like in real estate, they get their license. And I think that's just putting in your dues.
Yep.
You start out, you're paying your dues, but then eventually at some point we have to transition from that it's my own job to now
It's your business. Yeah.
it's my business. And
Right.
then business means that, you're building the business, you're working on it, not working in it.
Right.
And then you have the opportunity to work in it. So I get to step in and go, okay, I want to work in it. And
Right.
then other times I don't want to work in it. I'm going to work on it.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. You should be adding value. You shouldn't be the value.
right.
Right.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
once that goes away, or you get tired or burn out or you die or something, that's it.
Right.
Business over.
That's one of the things I love about real estate investing is because it gives you the opportunity to be a business owner without running a business.
Absolutely.
That's essentially what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I even like I love Shark Tank. Right, Shark Tank's one of
Oh,
the
dude,
great
that's my
shows.
favorite show. I love that
Like
show.
Mark Cuban's like a personal hero. And you watch stuff like that, and it's like, man, like, it's really interesting to see deals play out that way. It's a really interesting way to see deals get negotiated. But even just talk about the profitability of businesses and how they function very, very similarly to real estate. Like
Yeah.
you have this thing that's producing an income that has income opportunity and potential. You have to keep putting into it. But for the most part, like once it's up and running, you should be able to put so much into it and let it run.
Absolutely. I think that's
and-
the benefit.
Yeah, 100%. And
That's what it should be.
right. And that's I'm still, I don't know how much direct to seller marketing you get, but the overall public connotation of real estate investors is really relatively negative.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you guys are making it unaffordable. It's like, you don't understand how much like we're supplementing a market that like is in need. Like there needs to be more landlords, not fewer. There
Yeah.
needs to be more property owners, not fewer.
Yeah.
And there's plenty to go around. There's absolutely plenty to go around. The only reason that you don't have a slice of the pie is because you're, whining and stomping your feet and saying nobody should be a landlord. It's like, well, that's one way of looking at it, but it's a great way to never be one.
Right. Yeah. And we deal with a lot of leases and stuff just beyond the property management side too. So, and then you see some people that's unfortunate, their credit and stuff, and you struggle to get them in a place. I'm surprised some of these people, and I don't mean this in a bad way or making fun, that they even have a place. That, but there's different subsets of landlords that will allow certain individuals. You are right. They need to be more, because there are some that will allow individuals who they have a 400 credit score, or was it, would you say 415? Was that what we were talking about on the way up here?
Like 440.
440, nice. You know what I mean? And the other one had like a 500, and it's like, you really don't have a lot of, they don't have a security deposit. They even got denied for rhino insurance. Wow. Like that's a whole nother, and these guys that don't know who rhino is, by the way, is a just anyone listening, it's an insurance that you can pay a monthly payment, and then they end up giving you
annual now.
Oh, it's annual now?
Well, one time,
and so
they changed because a lot of times people would not finish out their lease, so then they'd lose out on the premium, so now they just charge a premium.
It's like insurance for security deposit.
So you could pay, if your security deposit would have been $4,000, you might get approved to pay $400 instead of $4,000.
And Rhino covers up the.
And covers it. Yeah. So anybody listening to that, if you didn't know that, if you're getting into the game, I'm not saying go look at Rhino. I'm just saying that there is that exists. So, but yeah, there should be more landlords, absolutely, because there's and we pay a lot of taxes. I mean, don't get it twisted. We may not pay the income. We as landlords may not pay as much income tax.
Yeah, you don't get a homestead exemption. You're paying that full bill. You're paying that full tax bill.
Yeah. We may get some tax breaks on at the end of the year for other things, but we definitely pay that full tax bill. And so,
arguably the important stuff, right? Like the property taxes fund a lot.
Oh yeah,
your roads, your schools. Yeah. I mean, you're paying a big part of what keeps the society running.
And then as an investor, you're also paying all your contractors, and depending upon those contractors, some may, but some of those individuals, some of the bigger companies, you're paying them, and they're paying their employees, and those employees are getting taxed income. So your money does flow downhill. It does at some point. You may not be paying it. Right. But it does flow downhill, because if you go to, a window company, right? They're legit. They're paying their taxes or whatever. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're filing and everything. So they're going to file for their employees, and their employees are going to pay income tax. And you funneled that down in some way or another, where most people, I agree, they're like, oh, well, the landlords are evil, but they're not. They're not. They have to be there.
No, yeah. And I think really it comes down to, like, people have a really difficult time wrapping their head around how much abundance there really is, because they fixate on the lack, because there is a lot of lack. But most of the abundance that's out there, the only reason it's getting consumed by the certain number of people is because there's a certain number of people who understand that there's abundance, and they keep at it. They don't let a bad situation or a bad deal or a bad month or a bankruptcy or something like that kick them in the teeth and keep them down. There's more out there. You can keep going, and there's opportunity for everybody. Now, I'd say, like, one of my favorite books in the world, even to this day, I would read it to my kids. If you haven't read it to your kids, you should read it to your kids, is The Richest Man in Babylon.
I have that book.
It's hands down one of my favorites. Just from, like, a money mindset, because that was the thing that got me wanting to go into medical field. Right at, like, remember, like, the first president I got the chance to vote for was Obama, and, like, I graduated in 2012, so he was already in office for like 4 years. Wanted to go in the medical field. I was going to save the world on the backs of an orthopedic surgery career. But it was very much this concept of, earning money was good, but being an entrepreneur or being fixated on earning was a bad thing. Like, overall, like, being fixated on earning as much money as you possibly could was a bad thing. And I've just done a complete 180, because it's arguably one of the best things that you can do.
You can help more people.
You can help more people. Money is good for the money. Money is good for the good that money can do. Right. Like, there's only so much you can do if you don't have the means to.
It's the mindset of, like, people. Oh, well, it's if you have someone has a cheap mindset, and they're they always want the cheapest thing.
Yeah.
Like, they can't really get as much help. Like, but if you are getting paid, for what you do. Right. And you earn those skills, and you pay your dues, and you grow, and you get paid more. You can do more. You can help more people.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be like that way.
Reach more people.
You can reach more people, and that's really what it is.
Yeah.
And as investors, our job is to be able to do that. We're reaching more people. So get paid great for it.
Right.
You know, in one form or fashion, we get paid good for it. So
yeah, and it's it's definitely a skill thing, and that's one of the things that I think most people misinterpret is like, if you want to come in and do what I do, I'll show you how to do it, and I'll keep you to the task, I'll keep you accountable, but you'll quickly find out that like, no, this is not for everybody. There's other ways to do it. Like coach is a really good example. Like coach needs a professional. He needs somebody in his life who's helping him vet deals, bring deals to him and things like that. Cause he's got a full blown business and career that he has to maintain and sustain. Like this, what we do is its own full-time career, and learning that delegating and feeding that logistical chain from start to finish is really, really important, because it's what keeps everybody in business. It's what keeps the economy happy. Like
I find a lot of young guys too, they don't want to pay dues.
Yeah.
Like, can't just get to that. And like, no, it doesn't work like that. You have to actually pay your dues out. You got to go through the hard shit.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to immediately just jump out and make a shit ton of money. It doesn't work like that.
You can time collapse, but you can't just skip it.
Yeah. You can time collapse. You can, I mean, things, even the 3-hour conversation I had with Tony, that's a time collapse.
Absolutely.
Right there, just boom.
Oh, he saved me 5 years.
Saved me 5 years, you know, and then it's
Hope
just little.
you gave him lunch too with that coffee.
I honestly think he bought the coffee. Like he was just super generous with us, and I was broke. I was broke. I got like $5,000 off of that flip that we did for managing the project and bringing the lead.
But you learned.
I learned,
and that was the part where most people mess up, is they're so focused on when they're young, in the younger stages. Like I've got to. I'll never forget being told, you got to go to work to learn and not for money.
Yeah.
And when you do that later on, it helps, because that's where you make your money. Because you go, because of that deal. Yeah, you may not have got rich off of it, but you time collapsed.
Yeah.
You made some money, but you learned a shit ton.
Absolutely.
And then now you're sitting here years and years later, and you're like, because of all that,
right,
and everything else in between, you're where you're at.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of, like, I've never heard it described that way as time collapsing, but like the number of like mentors I've sought out, like both in a like amateur and professional capacity, just people that have been where I want to be, just going up and asking them the question like, hey, how can you rub off on me a little bit? And I've just gotten really lucky to have found people who are willing to give me a lot of time and mentorship for free. And then there's a lot of time and mentorship I've paid for. I just joined Sub 2. Like I that's a $10,000 mentorship. Like, that's not cheap, but I see the value, especially as we go into changing and shifting markets on creative finance. Like it's worth the money. It's the opposite. I'm looking for more dues to pay. Bring the dues on, right? Because it's going to get me to a level that we're above where I'm at now.
And I think so many people stop. So many people stop at that. They dream of going and doing all these big things, but then when it comes to paying the dues, they're like,
yeah,
I think it should be the other way around. You guys owe me some shit, or you see that, the
scarcity
young guys,
mindset.
You owe me some shit. Where it's like, no, you got to pay the dues. So
or they sit around waiting for the perfect deal because they don't think they should have to put the work into it.
I worked as a big sign in my office that says the deal of a lifetime comes once a week. Yeah. And so far it's played out to be like almost exactly true. Like there's almost like this, since we've had people on all gears, like we've had like a killer deal across the desk of the team like once a week.
I like that.
Yeah.
I taught jujitsu and worked at the academy for free for many years. That's how I learned the business.
Sure.
I was like 15 years old, and I would just go spend. Actually, I was younger than that. I was 14. I was answering phones at 14 and 15.
Yeah.
Just get free. I never got paid, and not until I opened the school did I get paid.
Yeah.
And so when I look back, and I'm like, but that had all those things that helped teach sales and everything else, and translated into real estate later on. But it was one of those things where I remember being told that, and that's what Orlando told me. That he's like, you need to go to work to learn, and that's it. And so I just showed up. But I've said that to so many individuals over the years, whether it was like coaching someone in jiu-jitsu and like, hey, like if you just come teach and let this shit rub off on you, you'll learn how public speaking, tonality, sales, you'll learn how to deal with people, because it's a people business. Real estate's people business still. You learn all these other skills. Instead, they're like, well, no, I want to get paid, so I'm going to go work at McDonald's. And they're like, dude, you just fucked up. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
That work for free is so huge, and I would never, I would do it again.
Sure.
If I would do it again, I ain't doing it now. We've paid those dues, but as a teenager, I would do it again, and I would encourage any teenager that is listening or anybody who's young trying to get into something. There's nothing wrong with working for free. In fact, the older guys, the guys who like to help, they actually will spend more time with you because you're willing to
Right.
get in there and grind
Right.
at no cost. I remember Randy, that was me. I was like, I didn't want to get paid. Just stick me in here with, there's some other mentors that with it. Just, I got paid on some, but it wasn't about the pay. I didn't mind being broke. I just wanted to learn,
Right.
I just wanted to spend time on these guys. They made a lot of money. They, taking, had they owned a bank. Like, I'm like, I want to learn this stuff from these people. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big part.
One of my, some of the best deals that I've done have been like me approaching. So like I did this awesome flip with Nathan Bowers last year, and I was just like, hey man, like, what are you guys doing? Like, I was selling him this deal. I was in the middle of wholesaling him this deal, and he was like, well, why don't you just hop on title with this one? Like, hop on title, figure, like, we'll show you what we do. You just fill the gaps, and the gaps were basically just find a crew and hit these mile marks. I mean, he gave me a clipboard, was just like their whole playbook. I was like, you don't understand how, like, you just changed my business. Like, just like that. You changed my kids' lives, my wife's life, like my life. Like, you just changed my business just because, like, it was a mutual opportunity. I was bringing him a deal, but he absolutely, like, just gave up money.
Yeah.
And said, well, here, you run this. Like, he was going to pay a project manager on it anyway. He's like, you just manage it and we'll go 50-50.
And you learn so much from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's not even the money part. Some people look at that and they're like, they would look and think, you're out of your mind. Why would you ever do that? But you're like, no, you'll do it because of what you get from it is way more than, because
$15 an hour.
Yeah. Because you'll make, you know what I mean? You make the thousands of dollars or whatever, but you walk away with just that.
Yeah.
Now you got to go find something to do with that shit. But instead you walk with the knowledge and that doesn't go away.
No.
How to create that.
Yeah, absolutely.
How to build it, so.
I tell my kids all the time, man, if I could go back to high school today, I'd be selling candy out of my backpack. I'm like crazy. Like, it's exactly.
I think we're going to be starting that here pretty soon.
And a lot of times they don't even need the money because they live at home.
Yeah.
Everything's being paid for. So
that's another one I see too. I'm like, dude, you live at home, man. Like, what do you? But I think though that also causes some.
I was just about to say
laziness.
The biggest thing that spurned on my career, and honestly, like, the level of success I've gotten was my dad cutting me off.
Yeah.
My dad cutting me, which was hard for him to do because I was a father of 4. I came to him hat in hand, eyes full of tears. Like, Dad, we don't have food in the house. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, Christopher was real young. My youngest was real young. And there was a couple times that, like, I remember there was one day in particular that we were in a rent house over by Lake Arlington. This was like 2016. Or maybe even the end of 2015. So we were like not even 6 months into our real estate career. And the lights got turned off. The fridge was empty, thankfully, because otherwise everything in there would
like, damn,
gone bad. And the light, like, we were just like, my wife were there like complaining because the dishwasher had just blown up on us. We were trying to get the landlord on the phone. Then the lights got cut off. We went into the fridge to go save the food and there was nothing in there. And I remember thinking, like, this is a real low. This is the lowest of lows. Like, I'd never felt lower in my life than, like, my kids being hungry for lunch and the power wasn't on and there was no food and, like, the dishes were dirty. Like, there was, like, we were really stuck. And my dad bailed me out of a couple of situations like that early on. And what really got me going was the day that he pretty much told me, like, hey, bank's closed. And I was like, okay, I get it. And I was up for the challenge. I had some deals under my belt. I was like, it's what I need. I was begging him for it. My brother went through the same experience where he didn't have the same level of responsibility, but he had the same crutch.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, cut the umbilical cord and forced him to like stand on his own 2 feet that, like, he went out there. And so, I'm a big proponent of that. Like, you hear anecdotes of old school real estate. Like, you get your license, you get your gold coat, you go buy a BMW or a Cadillac.
Yeah.
And you basically need the pressure in order to perform. But there is some truth to that. Like, you kind of have to set your financial thermostat one way or the other. And, whatever your financial thermostat is, you're going to hit it, right? Like, if you're comfortable making $1,000 a month, that's what you're going to make.
Yeah.
But if you're not comfortable until you hit 10,000, then you find ways to make that happen.
You put your back against the wall.
Yeah.
You literally put your back against the wall. You had no choice.
Nope.
I'm with you. I feel like I grew up spoiled, like,
same,
fucking spoiled rotten. Like, but I cut myself off.
Yeah.
My mom was like, you all right? You sure? I'm like, I'm out. Bye.
Yeah.
I'm out. I'm gonna figure this shit out. I was 19. I was like,
that's awesome.
We just walked out. I was like, because I knew if I stayed, I knew I was going to be spoiled as shit for the rest of my life. And I was like, I didn't want that.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to get out. So I cut myself off. I have got some wild stories of, repossessed car and things like that. In the very early years, I had a repossessed motorcycle that, so like, but you're talking like 19 years old, right? I'm nowhere near that age now, but
it's
it's
right time to make mistakes, really.
Right. You know what I mean? Go out and buy a motorcycle you never know how to drive or some shit, and get it repossessed. Like, but it's just making dumb mistakes. But I had to make those dumb mistakes. I know what it's like to have the lights out. I know what it's like. I know how long it takes the water to get turned off. I know how long to get the lights turned out a couple times.
I know how long it takes to get the water turned back on, which is even worse.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know those feelings. I know what it's like to have the eviction notice.
Yeah.
But all those things build you, and I think that's something that and most people are scared to take that jump. You're not going to die, and you're not going to starve. There's you will always. That's the one thing I do remember is thinking to myself, like, I'll always have food.
Yeah.
There's always somewhere I'm going to get food. Like I mean. Nobody just, there's going to be one way or another, I will have food. And if I can just handle it, I'll handle it. I mean, I think that really, that cut off, and it's funny because me and Danny makes fun of me. He's like, you went the hard way. I didn't go the hard. I had to do it the way I had to do it because I didn't grow up like most people. I grew up very spoiled.
Yeah. Yeah, I did too. My dad
and
worked real hard, and I had a pretty, he was in real estate. So like we felt, I say that, like we felt the recession, but we did, like I was in, my high school career was 08 to 2012.
Yeah.
That was beginning and end of high school. My dad sent me to Europe a couple of times. Like he sent me on like trips. I was in like all different kinds of like programs. He sent me down to Houston for like a pre-med like event and conference. Like, but like looking back on it now, I was like, oh, he was busting his ass to make that stuff happen for me.
Right. And you never felt it.
Never felt it.
Yeah.
If like looking back on it now, I really understand how much stress that they were under.
Yeah.
But then, like, I just thought we were loaded. I was like, hey, man, like,
you didn't feel it.
No.
He felt it. He felt the pressure. Just, hey, I got to perform.
Yeah.
You didn't feel it, but then eventually, once you get cut off,
yeah,
it all changes. And then, but it's interesting how that I'm sure you probably have that mindset changes too to your kids, because you look back and you're like, I don't want my kids to go and feel that what I felt as a kid. I want them to know, like, actually, this is how it really works. We're going to prepare you when you get out of here.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, it was actually pretty heartbreaking for me for a couple of years, especially because, I met my daughter when she was just like the couple days after she turned 2, and Jackson had just turned 4 the month prior. Nicholas and Allison are only a couple weeks apart. So they're all roughly the same age. But there's a pretty big difference in those 3 and their perception of money and my youngest's perception of money. Mm-hmm. My youngest has like zero perception of like what things cost and what it is to not afford something. My oldest 3 still are very conscious of like, hey, do we have the money for this? And it's only in the last couple of years that's kind of like weaning off. But for a long time, they stopped asking for things because they would get, which was my fault. I was too honest with them about like, honey, we don't have the money for that.
Yeah.
And so that was like, I would almost consider that a mistake on my part of like kind of getting it in their heads like that we were broke, because we were, for what we had enough to get by, but we were broke. And watching that little mindset shift between the older 3 and our youngest, it's like, oh, okay, like it's a sign of like, that's how broke we were, that's like burned into their heads. It's in their DNA of like having to really consider what it is to not afford something.
Yeah.
And
I think it's some level of benefit down the road too.
It does. Yeah, for sure.
They understand something more, because I just know, as weird as this, because you didn't grow up like I did. You grew up different. You were like hope chest and had to, kind of save up, and Misty grew up in the hood.
Hey man, that's what's up. So did my wife. My wife grew up in all the hoods.
Misty stabbed a motherfucker. No. No, but I knew you grew up different, and so I think
we grew up with expectations of, hey, you have to provide, you have to go to work,
like,
you have to.
The dollar menu was a big deal for you guys, right?
Wow.
Yeah, you go to Taco Bell, you get 2 things off the dollar menu. That's all you eat.
Wow. And I met Misty, and I was like, huh? Like,
that was a special treat.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, though. I mean, I would say like that's like I wish I could go back in time and be that way, because like now that we're actually like earning and have like a good income and we're stable, it's kind of the opposite now. It's just like because my aunt and most of my family was this way. It was just like very generous. Like, hey, we can do something cool. Let's go do something. My wife's into that too, because she had a really rough childhood. I mean, she got to do nothing. So she's heavy on let's go do everything with the kids.
You want to experience things.
Absolutely.
Not buying shit.
No. Yeah, we don't buy, like, I take that back. We buy too much stuff, but it's not really like for the
There's
kids.
nothing wrong with spending it, though. You earn it, you make it, you
100%.
spend it, enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's why you do it.
Yeah, that's what it's, but there, yeah, exactly. Same belief. Like, that's what it's there for. But yeah, no, we very much are trying to kind of like do things differently than how we were raised on both sides. Like I was raised privileged, I would consider, and she was raised very, very underprivileged. And so trying to find a way to meet in the middle there, it's a tough thing to do, man. Parenting is weird. It's such a weird guessing game. We're messing them up one way or the other. Right? We're wrong.
I think that's funny that you got the spoiled husband. They grew up spoiled, and you got the hood wife. What's up with that, man?
Oh man,
they grew up. I'm not saying your wife grew up in the hood, but they grew up.
She did.
They grew up. She did. They just grew up different. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know.
Yeah.
You just like spoiled guys, Misty? Is that what it was? No, I'm joking.
I honestly, and that's one of the things. So like growing up, and this was part of having a Latin mom, I think, because she drilled it into our heads, like, hey, women, you don't need to be the sole provider. Women need to do their part. You need to have a partner who's like in there with you. And that's one of the reasons why my wife was in real estate with me for a long time. But as time goes on, the amount of pride that I feel being able to provide for my family and give my wife a life that's very, very different than what she probably imagined for herself as a little girl or as a child growing up. It's a huge pride point for me, and that's kind of like what keeps me going. Like my wife is like a diamond in the rough. She shouldn't have turned out the way she turned out. Like her dad was murdered in front of her when she was 2. Like she's got a lot of substance abuse in her family, all across the board, in her generation, the generation above, and the generation below. It's pretty gnarly. But she came out of it like a peach, just like real well, like, battle hardened, and she just has like certain expectations for life now, and it's really interesting.
I think that's what happens. You just come out a certain way, and it makes it better for everybody else down the road.
Absolutely,
make it out. So
yeah, absolutely.
Man, I love it, dude.
Yeah, I know we're running.
You're just the different stories. I know we didn't talk all real estate, but I think that there's a lot of back things a lot of mentality that goes on that people don't talk about. You hear different shows and different people talk about real estate, those are the cool deals and this and that, but just all just all the mental side of that to me is killer, and I think that is a lot of value for someone that's listening or watching this, because that's really what matters most. If your mindset's not right, all the other shit ain't gonna work out anyways. You said it. 95% of the aren't gonna do it. You can give them the playbook, but you got to have the mindset first, and the 5% that have the mindset, they'll knock it out. So
it's right on the head too. That's the only difference. That's the difference between the 95 and the 5 is like it's right there. It's in between the years. Yeah.
Well, man, I loved having you on. I'd like to bring you back on another time to actually do like a deal breakdown where we sit and talk, and actually take one deal and from start to finish, really deep dive into it, break it down.
Yeah.
And that'd be the next one. So
cool.
Well, guys, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time.